So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the 10th session of our 12 sessions on various health and well-being subjects that we're talking about with Dr. Mark McCaldin and myself. I'm Mark Philpott, the MD of Newcastle Premier Health Group, and Dr. Mark is one of our senior clinical directors and working with me here in the clinic on a day-to-day basis. So hi Mark, good to see you again. So we're going to have about 20 minutes today talking about keeping your mind healthy. And this theme is the theme we've been running through the whole of the last 12 weeks or 10 weeks to date has been around the COVID crisis and how really to help people at home and people thinking about getting back into the workplace. We hope a couple of the points we raised today will be of value. As always, we record this Zoom, and we try and make them available for people to look back over at a later date. So keep an eye on our social media channels and the website, and you'll be able to tap into them if you haven't been able to join us today. We'll be here same time, same place next week at 3 o'clock until 4. We try and do it every Thursday afternoon. So if you do have any other ideas that you would like us to pick up in the future, feel free to get in touch as well and let us know, and we'll be keen to bring your conversations to the chat that we're running. So the background to today's conversation, all around keeping your mind healthy, is that we've had a lot of people at home on furlough. Life has suddenly changed and taken a big change of direction really for a lot of people. And now we're sort of coming through the process of coming to terms with what this new landscape, this new world is going to be all about when people come back to work, and how it's going to affect them personally, because of all sorts of issues that have impacted, whether it's financial or being separated from friends and family or loved ones, or being made redundant from jobs because businesses have failed. So there's going to be a whole range of societal issues that we're going to have to all contend with in one form or another. And certainly from our perspective, with the types of calls we're taking, we're seeing a lot of people getting in touch with us who are talking about the impact of all of the above really on their personal mental health. And we're keen to see people talk about their mental health as much as anybody else. So we thought we'd start off today with a few questions about some of the risk factors, I guess, that exist. So Mark, from your perspective and based on some of the conversations maybe that you've had with people that we're helping, what are some of the key risk factors that you would want to make people aware of that might suggest that people are starting to suffer from an unhealthy mind?
I think there's a combination of things, really, isn't there? So there's all the external structural stuff which is going on. So it's the fact that people are having to self-isolate and they're having to live in a way which they're not used to doing, and particularly for people who may perhaps not have the best social networks and support anyway. Now that we're isolating, we're not seeing our friends, we're not seeing our family anywhere near as much as we did before, that poses a risk. And just the very fact that people are either furloughed or are working from home increases their level of isolation. It changes their normal routine. They no longer have access to the support networks and the social networks that they had before through work. We know that work's good for people, and being in a workplace, being with colleagues, being with others, and the stimulation of having something productive to do is good for our mental health. And to lose that, whether it's imposed because of medical reasons with shielding, or whether it's just imposed because of isolation due to home working, that's a high risk factor. Then I guess you've got to consider the personal factors for the individual. So there are people who have pre-existing mental health problems, and clearly they're going to be at much higher risk of problems during the COVID lockdown and the aftermath of it than people who've otherwise been mentally well and haven't experienced mental health problems. Lots of the kind of problems that can occur happen because of the lack of routine. So boredom is a risk factor, not having anything to do with your time. That can lead to an escalation of use of substances, whether it's caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, or perhaps anything else that people tend to use to relax. I think there's clear evidence that people are more likely to turn to those things during the lockdown to ease their boredom and to fill in the hours when they've got nobody to talk to and nothing to do. And then there's just the lack of stimulation from insufficient social contact with people, and the incredible sort of onslaught of negative coverage in the media. I mean, it's an unprecedented generational event that we're living through. And not only have we got that, but we've also got some pretty unpleasant happenings going on in the United States. And you only have to turn on the television and hear negative story after negative story, whether it's to do with COVID or to do with other things. And I think that weighs down on people's minds heavily. I think they're all risks that mean that the likelihood is that people who have previously felt unwell with their mental health are going to feel worse. And those of us, if we are lucky to have never had particular problems with our mental health, might experience them for the first time.
That's a really interesting point that you've made about the media. I think I can certainly resonate with or reflect on that, and it resonates with me personally, because you're right. You know, when you get up and you routinely turn on the TV in the morning, and perhaps when you get back from work, or if you're furloughed at home and you're watching the TV all the time, you're being bombarded with all that kind of negative noise. And of course, there's always been this dilemma, and I guess now more so than ever, where the media and responsible journalists are wanting to hold people to account, but the methodology of doing it very often leads to a negative narrative about what's going on, and people don't hear as much of the positivity that is out there, that perhaps we all need to embrace a little bit more to move forward. And I guess with that, then there's probably a skill, isn't there, or an awareness that we need to have, which is how do we turn off some of that noise that's out there, however pertinent or useful it might be in terms of holding our politicians and our people to account. There is a need from a personal point of view to be able to turn off some of that chatter, so that it doesn't actually stick to us as individuals and create a negative drain, I suppose, on our energy. And I think you and I both probably feel that it's not just the mind we're talking about, it's a mind-body thing that we have to protect, and the two are inextricably linked. And if we don't look after one, then actually we start to develop signs and symptoms in our body as well. On that last point there, I mean, I think there's a whole interesting piece around what's being discussed in the media. But when we do let stuff stick to us and it becomes quite a negative world that we seem to be swimming around in, what do you experience? What do we experience as individuals in terms of the physical signs and symptoms of the mental stress of dealing with all of this sort of stuff? Are there things that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of things that people might experience and may happen. Some of which will be apparent to the individual themselves. So if they start to think about how their body's behaving, they might find that their appetite is altered. They might find that their normal rhythms of life are changed, so the sleep pattern gets disturbed, or they might find themselves needing the lavatory more often because their stomach's upset. They may find that their heart feels different, that their pulse is a bit quicker, or they're having palpitations. They may feel sweatier. They may find that their energy levels have changed dramatically. So they may be much less energetic and just want to mope around the house and lie about all day. Or they may be completely fidgety and not be able to sit down at all, and feel very uncomfortable all the time, just having to be on the go to manage that excessive energy due to too much adrenaline and too much anxiety in the body. Similarly, sort of functions might change, so the ability to concentrate might disappear, and people may find that while they're working from home, it becomes extremely difficult for them to concentrate on their work. For many, I think the prospect of working from home has been a bit of a dream, but actually when the reality has occurred, it's not been quite so good as they thought it might be. Similarly, short-term working memory, just that ability to remember, I've got to do that this afternoon, or I better pick up that in the morning, that can get affected, so people don't really function as well as they used to if they're reliant in their day-to-day life and everyday life on working memory, then that can fall off. And then I think really it's things like self-care. So if you're somebody that's used to being up early in the morning, get dressed, shaved, washed and showered, and clean out the door early in the morning, finding yourself in your pajamas at 11:30 unshaven and unwashed is an unusual experience. And occasionally on holiday or weekends, that's a lovely thing. But if it's every day of the week, it starts to become a little bit, a little bit less pleasant, and it may be a sign that things are beginning to unravel a bit. Similarly, if you're somebody that enjoys a cigarette or a glass of wine in the evenings, that's fine. But if it starts to become something that it's creeping in at lunchtime, and God forbid creeping in first thing in the morning, and you're starting to find that your use of tobacco has gone from 5 cigarettes a day to 35, then they're clear indicators that you're not handling things quite as well as you ought to, and perhaps your concentration, also your focus on your physical health could be brought back in line. And we've talked in other of these discussions about the need to maintain physical activity and to maintain a good diet, good healthy nutrition. Make sure you're hydrating properly. Make sure you're not taking too much caffeine. Make sure you're not taking too much alcohol. Maintaining good sleep hygiene. So that you haven't got that blue screen in front of you last thing at night, showering you with negative news media stories, and all these things are to do with being disciplined about time management and self-management at home, so that you look after yourself. And a bit of that is giving yourself some slack. It's cutting yourself a bit of rope and saying, okay, I don't necessarily have to be up quite as early as I used to, and I don't have to exercise quite as hard and as often maybe, but it means maintaining the routine nevertheless if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that's, as human beings, it's hard to establish habits. And when you're at home and potentially you've been furloughed, and as you say at the start, it sounds like a wonderful thing, because you're at home sort of being paid a proportion of your income, if not all of it, and you've got all this time freedom to do what you like and to sort things out. But actually, we are creatures of habit, and when the habit of the work routine is broken, that is disruptive to our daily cycle and what we're thinking about and what we're processing on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose what we say to people is trying to establish and maintain some kind of routine, whilst at the same time giving yourself a little bit of slack and keeping the balance right is key. And certainly in terms of establishing new habits, whether that's drinking plenty of water each day, or having 3 meals a day at the right time, or doing a little bit of exercise each day, we know that it takes a long time to embed new habits. I think 60 days is what they say now, that you have to work hard at it before it becomes habitual as part of your lifestyle. So it's easy to talk about, it's easy to say, all of these things are things that you should do. But I guess my point here is that, isn't it fair to say that it's not easy? It's not easy to establish a routine. And actually, as doctors, as nurses, as healthcare professionals, I think sometimes we take it for granted that once we've offered that professional advice, that people will go home and suddenly do what we say. And actually, it's not always easy to do that. So if we had to focus people's minds on some key things that we reckon are beneficial to promoting a healthy mind, I mean, I'm thinking about drinking more water. So many of us don't stay hydrated enough as it is. But what are the key things? Water being the first. How much water should we be drinking a day to keep our minds healthy, Mark?
An absolute minimum of 2 litres. I think most of us probably struggle to get 6 or 8 cups of tea or coffee in a day, or equivalent, in terms of fluid. And I think when I speak to people who are working, often they'll say, well, I have 1 cup in the morning, I have a cup at lunchtime, maybe 1 in the afternoon, and that's usually it before supper. And that's really not enough. We should be pushing that level up by another, at least double that. So we should be aiming for 2 litres of clear fluid or equivalent a day. Now, it doesn't matter if you're careful with your caffeine intake, so you're not having only 8 cups of coffee, because that would be too much caffeine. But 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day isn't bad. There are other drinks, well, whatever you prefer, whatever you like, whether it's just water, or if it's a healthy form of squash that's not got too much sugar in it, something that's not carbonated, because that's not going to be great for your teeth. But if you're drinking, to be fair, the best drink of all is just water. If you're drinking 2 litres of water a day, you're doing everything you need to do from a hydration point of view, unless it gets super hot and unless you're sweating a lot. And in that case, okay, then you need to bump that up yet more, you know. And sometimes in really hot weather, you might have to go for 2.5, 3 liters a day to maintain your hydration. There are some top tips for that. You know, a lot of people who are good at it get up first thing in the morning, they'll have a pint of water before they do anything else. That'll be, you know, first job of the day. Get your first hydration shot in and get it done. And then whatever you have at breakfast is fine. And then through the day, remembering when you eat or when you take a break to just have that glass of clear fluid as well. And that's a good way to make sure that you're hydrated and you're nourishing your body from that perspective.
Now, there we go. Great tip there. So get up in the morning, have a pint of water before you do anything else. Do that for 60 days and it'll become a habit for life. Great. And I guess when you're exercising too, people forget, you know, now we're starting to get out and about and people are allowed to get out the house, and there's been a resurgence in activity, and a lot of people have been doing a lot of physical activity as well, trying to take advantage of that. But probably I'm certain there'll be cases where people haven't been used to exercising, they haven't been drinking very much either, and then they combine the two, and all of a sudden, you know, they're becoming even more dehydrated because they haven't appreciated just how much they lose when they're exercising, and they're not replacing those fluids. And that's an important thing to do, isn't it? To replace fluids when you're exercising.
Absolutely, you know, and particularly in warmer weather, if you're exercising hard as well, depending on what level of exercise you're taking, it is important to try and balance that out by rehydrating after your exercise. Of course, even if you just go for a walk, it's sensible to have a small glass of water when you get home, just to replace any fluid that you've lost during the walk. And the temptation during the lovely warm weather is to replace that clear fluid with a glass of fizzy alcoholic beer, which you sit, you know, in the sunshine with your feet up, having had your run or your cycle or whatever it is. Well, that's absolutely fine, but you need to prehydrate first before you have the alcohol, because alcohol is a natural dehydrating drug. It causes you to create more urine and go to the loo more. And so, yeah, again, there's no problem having that relaxing glass of beer in the garden as long as you've maintained your hydration after you get back from your run or your cycle or your workout, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that's true as well for tea and coffee, of course, isn't it? The caffeine is a natural diuretic and can help you pee more. So, you know, when we're relying on tea and coffee all day long, you know, you might think you're getting some fluid in, but you're probably losing just as much very quickly from having taken on too much caffeine. I think that's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, hydration is really important, and then nutrition is really important as well. And with the lack of routine and the lack of kind of daily rhythm, it's very easy for people to be tempted to skip meals or to take shortcuts and only have snack food. So I won't have lunch today, I'll have a bag of crisps. So maybe forget that while having a bag of crisps, I probably don't need a glass of water. So you take a salty snack, which makes you feel more thirsty and dehydrated, but you don't drink. And then you just kind of crack on with your day. And you've missed the opportunity to give your body some nourishment that it needs, but you've also failed to hydrate as well. So, you know, I think it's really important that people try as best they can to maintain a normal rhythm of eating as well as hydrating well, and making sure that as far as they possibly can, they pick the right kinds of foods. You know, low salt, not so calorie dense, make sure that you get plenty of fresh fruit and veg, plenty of fiber as well, and well balanced between carbohydrate, fat and protein. There's no sense to excluding any one or the other unless you're going for some form of specific diet, but just making sure it's a good, healthy, balanced, nutritious meal, maintaining the vitamins and minerals that you need, and making sure that you do eat regularly, because that's how to maintain, you know, your blood sugar and maintain your metabolism at a healthy level and in balance.
Absolutely. And one other, you just got me thinking there about, and it's relevant to how we keep our minds healthy. But one of the things that people often talk about at the moment is intermittent fasting. And you hear all sorts of confused conversations going around about whether you should or shouldn't eat at various times of the day. But there seems to be a good body of evidence coming through now that generally is, you know, backing the idea that providing you've got a nice balanced approach to healthy eating, that, you know, once a week or from time to time, there is benefits in having a pause in how much you're taking on board, so long as the remainder of your week is balanced, and you're not starving yourself. But, you know, a little bit of intermittent fasting can actually be a good thing for your mental health from what we understand. Have you got any comments or thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, you know, I think it's an evolving field, and the advice seems to be very much that our system, our metabolic system, can get just a little bit stressed by constantly metabolizing food. And there's the belief, isn't there, that we evolved as hunter-gatherers, and therefore we're not used to constantly having an abundance of food that we can just call on at any time of the day or night. And that perhaps is one of the factors that's contributing to the very high levels of obesity and all of the risks that involves, particularly now, through the COVID pandemic, we're seeing that obesity is actually one of the top risks for people to do less well if they become unwell with COVID. So, if it's something that as an individual you understand and you find it acceptable as a way of kind of refreshing the system a little bit and resetting the balance, intermittent fasting is great. And certainly for people who are trying to lose weight, there is really good evidence that adding an intermittent fast into your weekly routine significantly improves the outcomes in terms of weight loss. And then perhaps for those people who get there and have fasted for a while to lose weight, it helps maintain that weight loss, which is the key with weight loss, isn't it? It's not so challenging to get the weight off, but it's really challenging to keep it off. And so, perhaps thinking about, reading about, learning about, and experimenting a bit with intermittent fasting is not a bad thing, because it certainly can help mental health as well, and people feel brighter and more energetic, and it helps get them out of that kind of slump that they sometimes feel when they're just eating all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can certainly speak from experience that, having tried it myself, and I do from time to time, the energy levels and your mental health can feel almost refreshed the following day. And you kind of get up wanting to have that nice bowl of porridge in the morning, but there's a certain freshness about the energy that you feel. So definitely worth having a go at if people haven't already. And as you say, there's a double benefit there, which is if you are trying to lose a little bit of weight, especially given the risk factors with COVID, actually now's not a bad time to try and reintroduce some of those habits into your life, because we know unfortunately that obesity does seem to relate to or has a relationship with those people who don't do so well with the virus as others. Great stuff. Okay, and what about from a medication point of view? I mean, is it a good thing to become, if you start to feel a bit low or a bit down, and you're already suffering with your mental health? Well, what kind of advice are we giving to people about how to approach medication?
So, I think that's a difficult question to answer in a kind of easy, succinct way. None of us as doctors would ever want somebody to consider medication as the first option. It really mustn't be, the default. Okay, I'm feeling a little bit low. I'm feeling that things are a bit difficult for me, and the challenges are there. I know the answer is to go and grab a tablet from the doctor and take that and see what happens. That mustn't be the approach, because realistically, medication is a very good choice for some individuals, depending upon the level of their symptoms and their mental health, and depending upon how that's impairing their life or impacting upon their function. But it absolutely isn't the solution for everybody. And the decision whether or not to think about using medication and to actually have a trial of treatment and to go on medication must be one which is made after careful discussion and consideration with a doctor, preferably a doctor who knows you and at least knows your history and has an opportunity to talk to you at length. That said, for most individuals who are experiencing significant sort of diagnostic levels of symptoms of anxiety or low mood, treatment is potentially going to help. But it isn't by all means a panacea. It's not, it's got to be something which is approached with an understanding of what the medication does, and understanding what the risks are, and then what to do either if things don't go well, or if you get to the point at some stage later on where you decide you want to stop the medication and come off it. There is a lot of discussion. If you look on social media forums, there's a lot of discussion about medication for mental health being addictive. And in a very small number of instances, yes, that is potentially true. But for the vast majority of drugs which are prescribed these days, they aren't addictive. The difficulty, I think, is that if they benefit you and they really do make a difference to an individual's mental health, then it's difficult for that individual to then stop taking them, or to know when is the right time to stop taking them, because the risk clearly is that they relapse again and their symptoms come back. There's plenty of guidance for doctors in terms of choice and how to introduce medication and how to monitor and manage it. So it's definitely something that warrants a discussion with a qualified individual if it's starting to become an issue where people are feeling sufficiently unwell and sufficiently impaired by the symptoms to need medical professional help. On the other hand, there's a great deal that people can do to self-help. And a lot of the time, actually, with a little bit of concerted effort and a bit of research to find out what's available, and perhaps a bit of discussion either with an individual's own social network, with their own social group, or with the professionals, there's lots that can be done without the need to resort to pharmacology.
Yeah, perfect, great. Absolutely, and we've touched on a few of the things that people can try and get into. I guess sleep is such an important part of our mental health and well-being too, isn't it? I know I always feel a bit groggy if I've had 4 hours sleep or woken up during the night because I perhaps drunk too much water just before going to bed. So I think going back to our earlier conversation, it's kind of pace the water out during the day and allow your body to sleep, but trying to get a good night's sleep, 7-8 hours a night, can make all the difference over a week to your mental health as well, for lots of good physiological reasons that I'm sure we could get into. But I guess where I'd like to kind of move to now, just to kind of start to wrap things up for today, is what businesses can start to think about doing when they're considering the mental health and well-being of their people and their staff as they start to come back into the workplace. And are there any kind of top tips, if you like, that we would be giving HR managers and teams on what to think about that might help to promote a healthy mind of those employees who are at home or thinking about coming to work? Have you got any thoughts on that from a more occupational point of view?
Yeah, I think from the top of the list has got to be the one that we plug every single time we talk about this sort of thing, which is it's communication, communication, communication. Really, what's going to help employees who are currently furloughed or currently working from home to get back into work with a healthy mind is the reassurance of knowing what to expect when they come back, knowing that their employer has done a risk assessment to make sure that it's safe for them to do that they're thinking about how to support employees in the workplace to stay healthy, and to make sure that they're communicating that out to the workforce as extensively as possible and as widely as possible. There really is benefit from maintaining communication with the workforce one way or another. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a personal phone call to each one, but at the same time, it is important that employers maintain and managers maintain communication with the workforce. I think from the point of view of helping to look after the employees who are either working from home or who are not working but are furloughed, an employer can be a signpost. So it may be that an employee rings up or has a conversation with a supervisor or a line manager and says, I'm really struggling here. I don't know where to get help. And the HR department or the senior managers can signpost that employee to their own GP, perhaps to occupational health services, or to some of the charitable organizations like Mind, the mental health charity, or the Samaritans. Even just pick up the telephone to Samaritans, have a chat with them, see how you feel. So the HR and management teams can provide a useful function in that respect in terms of signposting, and even just offering a listening ear. A whole aspect of counselling is actually just being a sounding board and just allowing an individual to let some of the way that they're feeling out. And it can be frightening sometimes when people are expressing very difficult emotions or expressing things that we don't know how to deal with, but often they don't want you to deal with them. They just want you to acknowledge that they exist and to if you like, share the moment with them and understand that that's how they're feeling. And that empathy gives people a great deal of comfort at a time when they might be struggling with their mental health. The final thing I think really is just reassurance. And it may be that for some organizations, it's really not possible to give that reassurance. It may be that they just can't say, we've got you here. There's a job here for when the furlough is lifted or the restrictions are lifted, and they can't give that sort of reassurance. But giving as much reassurance as possible that everything that can be done is being done to keep the workplace safe, to keep you safe, to make sure that there's a job for you guys to come back to. Those sorts of things are messages that people want to hear, because that helps calm the anxiety and allay the fears, which are naturally going to spring up when they're sat at home, not much to do, thinking all the time about the future and worrying for their families and their own well-being, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think even if businesses, we would probably say, even if businesses can't provide that reassurance to people, because there are so many uncertainties about what will happen with the workforce and who will or won't be coming back. I think the idea of being honest and open when we're communicating with people, wherever possible, is a good thing, because I think people do naturally get drawn into feeling a lot more mentally well if they can trust in the communication that is coming from the people that are there to employ us. And I guess that translates onto a geopolitical world as well. I mean, there's so much chatter. Good Morning Britain was certainly all over this morning when I got up, talking about the importance of that leadership role from our figureheads in society, and how much that can have a strong bearing on social unrest and anxiety. And I guess it translates down, to an individual level in so many different forms, because fundamentally we are all individuals. And the other thing that I think we say to businesses is, don't tarnish everybody with the same brush, because as people, we are individual people, and having the radars out there looking for those individualities and looking for those vulnerabilities amongst people who you might think are resilient and coping and doing well and not feeling anxious about coming back, but are sitting quietly in the background doing what they do. Very often they are the ones that you need to watch out for the most. That's been a fascinating quick talk and run through. I don't know if you've got any final comments yourself on that, Mark.
Not specifically, no. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the sort of the issues. I think, going back to the question about vulnerability and what people can do, I think the people that manage their time well usually will be good at managing their time well at home, and those are the kinds of tricks and the kind of habits that we can encourage people to get into, which is, if you've got a lot of work to do from home, don't try and do it all at once and take 7 hours doing it. Chunk your time. If you have to read the social media, chunk it. Don't take a whole bunch of negative media on board for hours and hours and hours just before you switch the light off and go to sleep. But give yourself, 11 till 11:30 every morning is my news time. And that's when I'm going to look at the news. When I've got up, I've done a few hours work, I'm feeling a bit positive, I'm feeling okay, like I've achieved something. Okay, then go and get your snapshot of the bad news, understand it, accept it, put it down after half an hour, and don't go back to it again until the next day. Learning these habits about how to control things and contain the negativity and contain the difficult things, so that we've also got that light and shade, that we make sure that we factor in something enjoyable every day. We make sure we factor in a little reward every day, whatever it might be, so that we're not just grinding away at the things that we find difficult, but we're also giving ourselves some light and shade, some perspective through the day. They're really important habits that the people who are very good at it just do it naturally. And those of us who are not very good at it have to learn how to do it and do it better. What's true, I think, as we move through the COVID pandemic, we're going to see that you're absolutely right. It's all about the individual, because there will be some people whose mental health has been an issue for them in the past who are going to do very well through this. They're going to cope admirably. They're going to come out the other side unscathed. Likewise, there are going to be people whose lives have been relatively blessed with health and good mental health, and they've never had a problem before, and they're going to really be challenged. Then they're going to find themselves really up against a lot of difficulties from the mental health point of view, and the full spectrum of things in between. What we've got to understand is that if we see and feel that colleagues around us or employees are in difficulty, then it behoves us all to try and help, doesn't it? And as a bigger society, to try and provide that support, because we are going to get through this together, but we'll get through it much more intact and in a much better state if we help each other.
Absolutely. Well, on that positive note, as we say at MPH Group, teamwork makes the dream work, and it's never better when you're working together. So on that happy note, thank you very much for your time again, as always, this afternoon. Always a pleasure talking to you and chewing through some of these important issues. We hope that helps for people at home. And if you want to follow us and tie into our social media channels, all healthy, positive news from MPH Group, then feel free to do that. Otherwise, look out for the next session, which, as always, at least until the end of this 12-session run, is from 3 till 4 o'clock every Thursday afternoon. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Cheers, bye.
Cheers, Mark.